Hi, this is Chris Dunker with the Lincoln Journal-Star and journalstar.com. I'm here at the North Steps of the Capitol where there is a campaign announcement today for a coalition that is opposing the petition drive that's circulating to enact a voter ID law here in Nebraska. This organization's calling itself Decline to Sign Nebraska, and today they're kicking off their campaign with a couple of speakers here. So I will turn the camera around and we will follow along.
Yeah, that's cut out, but where we're at now is I think we have two petitions going to go.
So the voter ID petition drive was being sponsored by State Senator Julie Slama, who represents District 1 in Southeast Nebraska. Bankrolled by one of the big donors is Governor Pete Ricketts' mom, and they filed language with the Secretary of State's office. I'm not entirely sure if they've done any signature collection yet. So.
It's just hard to see all the documents, people in the background out here. No worries. Yeah, that's why I came up here.
I don't think so. Appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you everybody for being here. I'm Brad with Visit Nebraska. We're here to talk about our Decline to Sign effort on the voter restriction petition. There's a lot of reasons why this specific voter restriction petition is a terrible idea for Nebraska and Nebraskan voters. So we're joined by some amazing partner organizations who are going to also talk about why this voter restriction petition is not what we need and how we are going to fight it with all our power to make sure that no one has their right to vote taken away and infringed upon. So first up is going to be Preston Love.
Fairy tales can come true. It can happen to you. Fairy tales can come true. Fraud in voting is a fairy tale. I'm Preston Love Jr. I'm the director of Black Votes Matter Institute of Community Engagement. I have been and am a student of the Reconstruction period, when Jim Crow attacked the positive impact of the 15th Amendment with a number of ridiculous voter restrictions from the positive impact of that civil rights and post-war amendments to the Constitution, Amendment 15. I'm a veteran of the civil rights movement. When after the impact of that movement, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, I have and did witness the attack on the positive impact of that great piece of legislation, including the 2013 Supreme Court decision that dismantled the 1965 Voting Rights Act and started a wave of voter restrictions that we're dealing with even today, both nationally, Nebraska, and even this morning. So, I'm an advocate for the communities of color, for poverty-stricken communities. That includes rural poverty. And I say deja vu. Deja vu from Jim Crow. Deja vu from the attacks on the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The attempt again in this state to have a negative impact on the positive impact that we have had, because many of our communities, and surely my community in North Omaha, have shown that they will vote and can vote, and they should vote. And so now, deja vu, attacks on their ability to vote with restrictions, and shame on them. Voter ID stands shoulder to shoulder with poll tax and literacy tests and so many other restrictions, shoulder to shoulder, going back to Jim Crow, going back to attempts after the 65 Voting Rights Act. As our illustrious governor has stated, year after year, there have been attempts to insert voter ID in Nebraska, and they have failed. And now the attempt is to maybe take this attempt statewide. That's a trick, because the relevancy of voter ID has lower profile and lower concern statewide than it does in some of the other parts of the state. And so it may be a trick if we allow it to get there. And it's based on a false narrative. A false narrative. A false narrative. And that is that there is fraud. And so I say, with my gray hair and my study of Reconstruction and my experience with the Civil Rights Movement, is if it's not broke, don't fix it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And so I say, as I close, to the petition effort, I say clearly to those who would hear my voice now and later, and I think I might even hear an echo as I say, decline to sign, decline to sign, decline to sign the petition because it's not broke. Thank you.
That was Preston Love, the first speaker here today. There's 4 total that are on the list to speak.
Thank you, Preston. That was inspiring. Hello, I'm Mary Lee Moulton, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Nebraska. For over 101 years, the League of Women Voters has worked to expand voting rights across Nebraska and the country. This petition for a constitutional amendment would lead Nebraska in the opposite direction. Citizens who have the right to cast ballots in our state will be prevented from doing so. Nebraska elected officials, including the Secretary of State, stated that in 2020, the election in Nebraska was free and fair. There is a reason these voter restrictions have been turned back time and time again in our nonpartisan unicameral. There is no evidence of voter fraud in Nebraska. Even supporters of this petition acknowledge this fact. The amendment is so vague that we do not know how it would affect overseas voting by military personnel and their families, or how it will affect vote by mail in our state. We don't know what is going to be considered acceptable ID, or how citizens would pay for their ID. Imagine your 85-year-old grandmother who has voted for decades being turned away because she no longer has a driver's license. DMVs across Nebraska have limited locations, limited hours. How does a hard-working Nebraskan who rides the bus to work every day find time to go and get an ID during working hours? We ask you to stand as citizens of Nebraska who want to exercise their constitutional right to vote and decline to sign the petition to put voter restriction amendments on the 2022 ballot. As Preston said, decline to sign, decline to sign. Thank you.
Folks, thanks for being out here, and thank you, everybody. I'm Sam Petto. I'm the Communications Director at the ACLU of Nebraska. For more than 50 years in Nebraska, we have fought to protect the civil rights and the civil liberties of all Nebraskans, and that includes the right to vote. There are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of questions about this petition effort. There is one certainty, though. This would prevent eligible Nebraskans from voting. We don't need it. To be clear, Nebraska's push is directly connected to a deeply troubling national effort to sow mistrust, to undermine our elections, both at home and in other states. Not even a full year ago, some politicians in the highest elected offices in our state were trying to overturn the November election. Nebraska can strengthen our elections. Absolutely, we can and we should. Let's start by ending the unjust 2-year waiting period for folks who have served their time for their felony convictions. Then let's talk about expanding access, making it easier to vote. We do not need to prevent eligible Nebraskans from voting. You've heard so many reasons why. So we're asking you to reject the consequences, reject the costs, and decline to sign. Thanks, everyone.
Hi everybody, my name is Heather Ingoff. I work at Civic Nebraska, and I work to get out the vote. I work to increase turnout in our elections. And today I want to talk a little bit more about a few things regarding this voter restriction amendment petition. First of all, I'd like to highlight that we prove our identity with the voter registration process. There are people with the right to vote that do not have ID. They might not have a driver's license. They may have other barriers that hinder their ability to get an ID. This does not mean that these people with the right to vote should not be allowed to vote. I also want to highlight, as others have, that elections in Nebraska are already secure. They're already run well, and the current system works well. It is not broken. An additional ID requirement is redundant and unnecessary. Finally, I'd like to also highlight that our state constitution states that elections shall be free. There shall be no hindrance or impediments. This petition aims to add exactly those things. This petition aims to add an amendment following that sentence to enact hindrances and barriers. So join me in declining to sign the petitions regarding these voter restriction amendments.
Hello everyone, my name is Angela Montalvo and I am Tri-Chair of the Nebraska Poor People's Campaign. We have fewer voting rights now in the United States than we did 50 years ago when the Voting Rights Act was passed. The Poor People's Campaign has been fighting nationwide to expand voting rights because of states passing restrictive voter laws across the nation. This is a proposed constitution, a revision to our Constitution. Hundreds of Poor People's Campaign activists, including myself, were arrested on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. in an act of nonviolent moral direct action in an effort to push the Senate to listen to our demands to expand voting rights. We must continue this fight at all levels of government. This constitutional revision would restrict Nebraskans' access to vote and could disqualify eligible Nebraskans, all while making it difficult for poor and low-income voters to afford the ID that is needed to vote, and we don't even know exactly what those IDs would be. It's an unnecessary burden on the poor, and it is the opposite of what the Poor People's Campaign is fighting for. We should be making it easier to vote, not harder. Democracy requires more eligible voters participating in our elections, not fewer. We cannot go backwards. As we say in the Poor People's Campaign, forward together, not one step back.
Well, thank you to everyone who spoke today. What you heard today was about the cost of this voter restriction petition, how it would cost voters who would have to go purchase an ID, and how it could cost us up to $3 million in taxpayer money for the first year, and then continue to be over $1 million in costs after that. You heard about the complications that could occur to voters in trying to figure out how they're going to make it to a DMV to get an ID. And you also heard about the confusion that this would cause when voters are trying to figure out, how do I send in my absentee ballot with an ID? Do I need to make a photocopy? How is this going to work for our military voters who are voting overseas? There's a lot of cost, complications, confusion caused by this voter restriction petition, and so we need every single Nebraskan to decline to sign this dangerous and hurtful petition. We will defeat this. We will work together to defeat this, and we thank everyone for being dedicated to doing this decline to sign work. When I say decline, y'all say decline, decide. Decline, decide. Decline, decide. Thank you.
Okay, once again, this was
Members of the media, speakers will be available.
Chris Dunker from the Lincoln Journal-Star and
Journal-Star.com
Journal-Star.com here at the state capitol for a kickoff of kind of a campaign opposing a voter ID proposed constitutional amendment. It was sponsored by State Senator Julie Slama. They filed language with the Secretary of State's office a couple of weeks ago. You heard here speakers from 5 different groups kind of opposing, listing their reasons for why they are against this proposal, ranging from, if the voting system isn't broke, we don't need to fix it, to concerns about how some people would be able to obtain an ID who might not already have one. Once again, Chris Dunker at the Journal-Star and Journal-Star.com, and you can check our website later for a story kind of rounding this out. Thanks for following along, and have a nice Tuesday.